All right, so we're going to take a look at Section 3 today, the Internet and Constitutional Rights. Some of the major words that we have are going to be cyber law and browser, so make sure you take a look at those before we get started. All right, looking at Section 3, we're going to be talking about the Internet and Constitutional Rights, so how the Internet relates to a lot of the different constitutional elements and the laws that we have. So the goals for this will be to understand the issues of jurisdiction, so who covers who when it comes to the law, if it's a state, if it's federal, which state it would be in, and so on, that arise with Internet usage. We will identify the various constitutional issues involved in the use of electronic communications. Okay, so the first thing we're going to take a look at is who controls the Internet. So looking at kind of how the Internet rose and grew up, it kind of started to take place in the early 1990s when a lot of the citizens started to use this. And some of the issues that we started to come into was how is the Internet governed? So who's going to make the laws for it, how things are going to be built up, and things like that. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the foundations of cyber law. Cyber law is a law that is intended to govern the use of computers and e-commerce. So e-commerce is when you're buying or selling something online, and the Internet. So again, looking at cyber law, it's difficult to determine who controls what, and there has to be different laws and regulations that we're going to have created for that. Okay, so looking at the birth of the Internet was started by the U.S. Department of Defense in the 1960s during the Cold War. Basically, the U.S. created a internal network that they had where they could share information from one computer to the next and share things basically instantly with one another. The first thing that they had to help create that, they had the Advanced Research Projects Agency, the ARPA, and eventually they created a network that they called ARPANET. So basically this was a network where they could share information with one another, and it was a closed network to start with, where everything was protected from anyone else viewing it, essentially. Okay, when the World Wide Web started to boom a little bit, this was about 20 to 30 years later, again in about 1990. This was after about 20 years after most scientists and research facilities were using the Internet. Now it started to become a commercial network, basically. So anyone could access the Internet as long as they had a phone line connection. This was when kind of our dial-up started up. And you were able to view information almost instantaneously, where before, if you wanted to find the information, let's say looking for a case law, you would have to go to the library, you'd have to go to the government, receive the papers to learn about that type of stuff. But now with the World Wide Web, you're able to view that almost instantly. Okay, so looking at the evolving legal issues in cyberspace. So cyberspace is basically just the Internet as a whole, how things are owned, who owns them, how they're developed, who governs it, different things like that. So cyber law has developed basically all at once. It's something that wasn't really foreseen when the Constitution was created. Back in the 1770s, they had no concept that there could ever be a point where we have something such as the Internet. Okay, so a lot of the laws that we had originally created didn't really apply to how the Internet was used and how you were able to look at that going forward. Okay, so one of the issues is who has the jurisdiction over different areas of the law. So for example, if you were to buy something through a website such as eBay from someone in California, and they end up not sending you the good after you sent them $100 for the product, something like that, who has the jurisdiction over that? Is it going to take place in North Dakota? Is it going to take place in California? There's different issues that kind of came up due to that. So traditionally, states were given jurisdiction over their own citizens, but if you have something that is interstate, so between two different states, then you're kind of determining who's going to decide that. Most of the time that would go to federal law, but as the Internet has kind of exploded, it's hard to say that every different issue that you have should go to the federal court. Let's say, South Dakota have to pay for a law case, have taxes for that, for something that's taking place in North Dakota and California, that wouldn't really be considered fair. So you have to determine which state is going to be taking that. The next thing that you're looking at is how the laws in each of the state or how the laws apply for each of the different states. So in different states, there are sometimes different laws and different statutes that you would have to follow. So which state is the one where it comes into play more when you're looking at cyber law? And the second legal consideration relating to jurisdiction is whether or not you allow the state or federal court and whether or not you're going to use the state or federal court and how you're going to apply things to the Constitution and how you're going to relate things to the state laws and different things like that. So again, it's just a huge issue of where things are going to be taking place. So again, using the example of purchasing something from California, basically when you're looking at it, it's whoever files the criminal case. So for example, if you did not receive your $100 worth of product from someone in California, you would file the court case in North Dakota, and the person from California would essentially be expected to show up in court in North Dakota. Now, is that fair that someone would have to fly out just for a court case over something such as $100? That's where you get into other issues as well. So how do we take care of that? How are things carried out? When you're looking at, again, in the Constitution, typically if something is over, roughly $5,000 or $500, then you would have to have some sort of court case for it. If it is not over $500, then it's something where you won't necessarily be heard for it, and it might be just like a police filing or something like that. But if it's something over $500, then you have the right to have a trial jury and be heard. So where is that going to take place? Typically, it's going to take place in the state in which the court case was filed. So again, if you filed in North Dakota, the person from California would have to show up for court and answer the summons and things like that. Okay, the next thing that we're looking at is international jurisdiction. With the internet, very often different servers are located in different countries. So basically what that means is there are different websites that may be usable in the United States, but they are based in Canada. They may be based in Europe. They may be based in China. Wherever they are based. So how do you apply the different laws that you have from different countries? So Canada, China, Europe, all the different countries, different continents have different laws that they're going to be using. So what do you necessarily use when you have, issues that are arising? Again, this is where you're looking at trying to set up some sort of cyber law to create a system where everything is fair so that we can still have free commerce between different countries. So again, if you want to buy something from Canada, that would still be possible to have it shipped from outside of the country, and how things relate to that. So again, this is kind of looking at developing our different international laws. It's looking at developing our interstate laws on how everything is able to be fair. So some of the agencies that we looked at with the FTC, so the Federal Trade Commission, they have kind of the overall control over trading that is going to be happening in the United States. So again, if you're buying something from California, having it shipped to North Dakota, you are buying it from a different state, so it will be interstate, and that would make it a federal jurisdiction, so they would have control on that. Okay, so our first checkpoint, what characteristic of the internet makes exercising legal control over it nearly impossible? All right, internet-related constitutional issues. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is the freedom of speech. So the Constitution guarantees that you have freedom of speech from the government, and you basically have that right. Now, when it comes to the internet, it's a little bit different because it is text. It's not something where everyone is tracked down on what they're saying. So, for example, you could essentially go to a website and post something anonymously where there may not be things that are traced back to you. Now, there's different ways that they can track that down with IP addresses and who you have your internet through and things like that. But let's just say if you say something harmful about another person, it would be highly unreasonable that the government would step in and track down all of that stuff for you. There's still different laws that you have that protect you from freedom of speech. So if you're saying something that is controversial, that sort of goes against the government, things like that, those are still things that are protected from the government. Now, if you say something harmful to another individual, you could still get into defamation lawsuits. So if you say something extremely negative or lie about someone, you can still get into legal issues for that. Just because it's on the internet, it doesn't mean that you are protected behind some wall, basically. The things that you still say on the internet are still applied to with laws. Okay, so taking a look at some of the major court cases that we had that kind of establish our cyber law. So Roth versus United States. And if you want to read about these a little bit more, this is on page 41 of your textbook. But basically in this case, it was a decision that the court stripped away the protections of the First Amendment from obscene materials. Basically what that means is if you have obscene materials, so if you're looking at things where people are getting harmed, pornographic material, different things like that, you have the protection not to have, or it doesn't necessarily fall in line with the First Amendment protections that you do have. So if you're posting that stuff on different sites, things like that, you aren't protected, and you can still be sued for those types of things. You're doing something that is grossly obscene, so you can have charges brought up on you for that. Okay, Miller versus California. This decision set down a three-part test to be used to determine whether or not material can be considered obscene and consequently regulated or banned by local, state, and federal government. The 1973 decision of the U.S. Supreme Court founded it. So basically, what happened here was that it was the standard of determining what is the obscene thing that we're looking at. What determines if something is bad enough, and it had to pass some different tests that they created there. Okay, looking at our next one, the Communications Decency Act. What we're looking at here is in 1996, Congress passed a Communications Decency Act, the CDA. One of the purposes of the CDA is to control the knowing transmittal of obscene material through the internet. So again, basically it's looking at not having obscene material that's going to be showing up. It's protection for that. If you are sending that to other people, you can be brought up for criminal charges and face fines, face jail time, a lot of different things like that. Okay, the next one we have is the Child Online Protection Act. This was created in 1998 and required that all commercial sites use up-to-date technology, basically. So if you are trying to purchase something, there has to be some sort of protection to know that it's not a child purchasing it. So let's say a 10-year-old couldn't go on and buy something without parental permission, without having things that are basically showing that they are old enough to be buying something like that. Now, this is something that relates to the actual website owners, and they have to have that on their website, and they have to have some sort of protection notifying you that you have to be a certain age and things like that. So this act just basically gave some more protections so that you wouldn't get into a situation where a child orders something that they shouldn't be owning, different things like that. Okay, so now we're looking at our right of privacy. So when you're on the internet, there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily private. So what protections do you have from people using your information to sell information about you, essentially? So for example, when you go on Facebook and you share your address, you share your phone number and all of that type of stuff, is Facebook legally allowed to take that information and sell it to other people? And what is the different privacy issues that we have there as well? So again, just looking at the Facebook issue, it would be illegal for them to use your information to sell without your knowing. And there's been different cases that have been brought up based on that. Another thing that you're looking at is a lot of different email issues. So let's say when if you're working at a job and you send out an email, does your job have the right to see that email? And when you're looking at privacy issues related to the internet, if you are using a company email, the company can view your email, and they have different ways that they can check that stuff, basically. But they won't be able to view any personal emails that you have. So, for example, if any of the students or staff or anything like that were to use their K-12 email accounts to do something illegal or to send something illegal, whatever it may be, you could be, or you would be able to be checked by the government and things like that to make sure that there was no illegal things going on. If you're using a personal email, that's a different matter where it's not looking at your place of employment, things like that. And then you're looking at different issues, again, where the government can get involved to make sure that you're not sending illegal materials. Another thing that you're looking at is spamming, and spamming is just the process of sending unwanted information to you. So it could be something such as sending junk email. It could be something such as spamming your phone with text messages, telling you to purchase something, different things like that. Essentially, it's the same issues that you're looking at with telemarketers who call you. Now some of these are being applied to the internet, being applied to cell phones and things like that as the internet is growing. Okay, statutes of importance to cyber law. So these are some of the laws that are important for cyber law. And again, you can take a look at page 43 if you want to look through these again. We'll just kind of review these quickly. So the Lanham Act of 1776, Trademark Dilution Act of 1996. So basically, this was something that was expanded to give protections for trademarks and copyrights. So let's say if you create something, you have the right to be protected for online purposes as well. Before that point, your copyrights and trademarks were just protected for print, protected for your business and things like that. You weren't necessarily protected online. So this act just basically gave you the right to be protected online as well. Okay, then we have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. It attempts to protect holders of famous trademarks. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. And it's an often amended act that pioneered the treatment of computer-related crimes as unique offenses in the United States Code. So basically what this was that it created fraud and abuse for online as well. So an example would be if you try to trick someone to get money from them online, so you're pretending to be someone that you weren't, you could have charges brought up on you based on the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Okay, the next one we're looking at is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. It makes it criminal to knowingly transport obscene materials through interactive computers or interstate or foreign commerce for the sale or distribution. In addition, the CDA gives protection from defamation suits to internet service providers. So basically what happened here was it was determining who was at fault for the transfer of different materials. So for example, if something was sent through United Communications, so someone is at home, sends something that is obscene, something that is illegal to be sent, the internet service provider would not be responsible for that, and instead the person who's sending them would be responsible for that. So it was just a way to kind of clarify who's at fault for sending obscene materials. And the Communications Decency Act, again, just kind of went along with the Telecommunications Act. The Child Online Protection Act, it makes it a crime for site operators to fail to use proper technology and methodology to prevent minors from accessing harmful materials. So some websites that you will go to, you will have to check. They will have something on the front page that basically says, if you are not 13 years or older, you have to leave this site. If you are 13 years or older, you can click this site to enter it. And usually the ages that they have either 13 or they'll have 18 that you're looking at for those different websites. The Fraudulent Online Identity Sanctions Act of 2004. It increased potential prison sentences by up to 7 years for someone who provided material and misleading false contact information to a domain name registrar, a domain name registry, or other domain name registration authorities. So basically what it did was if you were trying to create a website and you use someone else's name to try to create that website, you could be brought up for criminal charges and you could potentially face a jail time for that. Okay, so looking at our next checkpoint, what are the constitutional issues related to the use of the internet? All right, here are some things, just kind of closing out Chapter 2 to help prevent legal difficulties. As a citizen, carefully read and reread the U.S. Constitution as it has been amended. This will help you become a properly informed citizen of the United States. So understand what your rights are, understand what protections you have. Pay special attention to the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment to better appreciate their value in assuring your liberty and to be alert to possible threats that could erode vital freedoms for you or others. So again, just making sure that you understand what rights you have. So for example, if a police officer would pull you over and try to bring you to jail, understand that you have different rights to help protect you and understand how you can apply those as well. So like we talked about in class on Friday, with the Miranda rights, you have the right to remain silent, you have the right to an attorney, different things like that. Understand what your rights are to help protect yourself so if something does occur, you won't face more stiff punishment. When eligible, participate in the government as a well-informed voter. If you are able and willing, participate in the work of the political party of your choice. If you are one of the dedicated few, become a candidate for public office. So as a citizen of the United States, you need to understand the importance that you have in being a voter. Understand that you should be able to participate as a political figure as well, if you are one of the dedicated few, and be willing to stand up for the political party that you believe in. When you use the internet, be aware of your rights and potential liabilities for what you say and the transactions you conduct. Okay, so that is it for Chapter 2. What we're going to do for Monday is I want you to take a look at page 47 in the textbook about the sports and entertainment law relating to Costanza versus Seinfeld. What I want you to do is review the background, the facts, the law, the issues and holdings, and answer the 3 questions that go along with that. We'll be discussing that a bit more on Monday.